Hey, welcome to the Equip for Life podcast. This is Josh Brom, and I just wanted to explain briefly that there are some changes that we're making to the podcast. And so I'm going to do the very quick version, like the 1 or 2 minute version, and then I will do the too long didn't read version for those of you that want to learn about more of the nerdy technical equipment details behind it. But for those of you that just want to basically know how it's going to affect you, I've been working on upgrading our podcast studio for the last several months, primarily because I wanted to make it so that one, we were saving money and a lot of time. We've been spending too much time editing these podcasts in the past. I was letting the perfect become the enemy of the good, and we were functionally editing these podcasts about as cleanly as we were editing other YouTube videos and course videos and things like that, which seemed like we were making the perfect become the enemy of the good. And also, just because the way our workflow has been, we couldn't get podcasts out very fast. And so earlier this year, we had a really great podcast, or actually I should say last year by the time this comes out. We had Robin Atkins on to talk about that story, the horrible story, the tragic story of that 10-year-old who was raped and then taken across state lines to have an abortion. Like, we filmed that episode within days after that story coming out. And a lot of people later said that it was really, really helpful to them. The problem was, because of our editing workflow, it still took about a week and a half from filming it to publishing it, which is crazy. And so with the new setup, I can get episodes out within hours of filming if I want to. And I'll explain how in a little bit for those that want to know how. But what this will ultimately mean is that the podcast will not be as cleanly edited. We are not going to spend as much time editing the podcast and really cleaning them up. So we're going to basically treat this podcast closer to live to tape. We can edit if we really have to, but I'm going to try to make this as live to tape as possible. So that means that you will hear more ums and maybe slightly longer pauses and stuff sometimes, because we are not going to be putting as much valuable time into editing podcasts and putting that energy into other things that are more important. So that is the conclusion. For those of you that don't want to know the technical details and stuff, you can go now. But I know that some people do like to know about this stuff, and so I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining about the changes that have happened, just for those that want to know. So you're going to notice in the podcast with Monica, for example, me switching on a switcher right now. So here's the wide. You can kind of see. So I have this device in front of me, and I've got 3 cameras going into it. I've got one for a podcast guest who is here right now. I've got a wide, and then I've got my close. And basically, all 3 cameras are being recorded right now onto a little hard drive. And I can actually, that's pretty cool. I can control my camera from my computer. So if I need to be a little brighter, I can actually adjust it. I'm adjusting it from my computer, which is super helpful, because in the past, being the only one in here that can work with cameras, I'd be going back and forth a lot and trying to dial this stuff in. So that's one of the reasons why Blackmagic Pocket 4K, which plays well with computers thanks to this switcher. And so everything's being recorded, but it's also recording these changes that I'm making, so that by the end, literally once we're done recording, this switcher will basically give me a DaVinci Resolve timeline, which is a one video editing software option with all of those changes. And if I wanted to, I could basically add an intro and outro and export it and send it exactly as it is. Even if maybe sometimes the camera changes might be a little bit late, or might be not exactly what I would have chosen in post if we had all the time. But again, we don't want to be spending all that much time picking camera changes and things like that, because that adds a lot of time into it. So this saves so much time. It does make filming harder, and I'm filming this after I did the 7 podcast with Monica, but it took a little bit of time to kind of get used to both hosting a podcast and having to deal with this thing. So at some point I might end up having Jen or someone else in the studio using this, behind the scenes. That's usually what a podcast will do. But this is how all the big podcasts that do things daily, this is how they work. Joe Rogan's podcast, for example, they're putting out like daily 3-hour podcasts. How? They're not editing them. They have someone using something like this and switching cameras live, and then they just put that thing out. And so I kind of wanted to streamline this process, do things closer to the way professionals do them. And especially because, that case with a 10-year-old, that episode was like a really, really clear example of this is not optimal. This can be done better. And so, and I'll film some B-roll so you can kind of see some of the stuff, especially for those of you who like me kind of like to nerd out about this stuff. I can show you that. The other main change that you're going to notice, we've got a white backdrop behind the desk that you'll see me using on live streams and webinars and things like that. And we also got these RGB light tubes for it. So we kind of basically were trying to update the look of the studio. The wood background thing was pretty hip when we did it, as if hip was the word anymore. It was fresh, it was cool, or whatever, the young people are saying. I'm too old now. That was cool at the time. It's not a very cool look anymore. And so for getting ready to film the Equip for Life Academy, which there's a ton of lessons on, we wanted a different look. And so I set up a white backdrop and these colored lights. So you can't see, but I have an app where I'm controlling these on Bluetooth, and I can make these things basically any color I want just by moving my finger around. And actually, we got very detailed on this. So this is like a funny kind of behind the scenes story. So filming the Equip for Life Academy videos with Emily, we actually, ahead of time, we have the spreadsheet. We had picked out all of the outfits she was going to wear. And then we had picked 2 different colors that kind of complement the colors of her outfit. And we had ahead of time, and we wrote out the exact settings on these lights in case we need to go back and refilm and stuff, which we are going to have to refilm a few of these. And so, it's just a way that we can make the things look a bit more modern, while also I didn't want things to look like we're trying to do it like a Fox News studio. Like that kind of feels like going overboard. Like I want things to look kind of nice, young, but also not like we're spending way too much money, trying to look like, CNN or whatever, pick that kind of thing. I'm not gonna have like a big fancy desk and things like that. Like I'm still trying not to spend basically more money than we need to, but this upgrade, I think, is really going to help us because we are going to save so much time every week editing podcasts. Like all this stuff is going to basically pay for itself in a matter of time, just because I'm not having to pay someone else to help edit the podcast. I'm not having to spend so much time editing the podcast. And again, it'll help us to be able to get emergency podcasts out faster. So that's basically the deal. That's why you're going to suddenly see me doing this thing, which is going to look weird and different, and why suddenly there's a little bit of, there's more color in the studio and stuff. It's because of those things that partly were an upgrade to set up for Equip for Life Academy, and kind of upgrading the look of, going from wood background to a different thing. And this stuff has a lot to do with streamlining the podcast specifically. So this isn't changing anything about the editing of like Apologist Reacts, Quick Response. We'll still edit those tightly. In fact, frankly, I'm moving to even doing, faster camera changes because you might be noticing that trend on YouTube. Basically, people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter as we watch TikTok and things like that. And so lots of camera changes and things are one of those actually effective ways of keeping people watching, ironically. And so we're going to keeping those edits tight, but it's specifically the podcast, and maybe like things like live streams or something like that we are going to spend a lot less time editing. And so, yeah, there's going to be some and some things like that. We'll still be able to go in, and I just said right there. We'll be able to go in, and if there's like a big problem or, we get stuck or something or we need to go and look something up, to make sure that we're saying something accurate, we can still, fix those things. But we're just not going to spend hours and hours and hours cleaning up most of the and really, fine tuning where the camera changes are and stuff like that. Because again, it was letting the perfect become the enemy of the good. So I hope if you're a donor that you're actually feeling really good about this. We did spend, a decent amount of money on the equipment, not more than we needed to. I got kind of, relatively low to middle end of all of the stuff that we're talking about, except for the lights. The lights actually, when we originally went and got 2 that were not the best, and they were not nearly as bright as we needed them to. So we actually had to add 2 more, and these are pretty nice versions of those, and they still honestly could be brighter. But generally, I'm really careful. I research the equipment. I watch a ton of review videos and look into articles and things because I really care about spending money wisely, especially donor money wisely. And this, just given how much time and money it's going to save us moving forward, this is basically an investment. And it's already reaping dividends, and it's going to pay for itself and make it a lot faster and easier for us to get out like emergency podcasts, which we're going to want to be able to do that kind of thing more often, as abortion is more often in the news these days. So there you go. That's the long version of why you're going to see me sometimes hitting buttons during podcasts. Is because I'm making things a little bit harder during the recording so they're so much easier after the recording, and so that we are spending our time and money as wisely as we can. So thanks so much for listening. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your support. If you're a donor who has made a lot of these changes possible, that has really, really helped. Like Equipped for Life Academy looks so much better. Like we're editing it right now. It looks so good and a lot better than the courses that we've made in the past. And so I hope you feel really good about that. And I want to say thank you to making things like that possible, so that we can show, the teachers who are going to be evaluating whether or not to get this curriculum, if they're doing a school, that, the quality of our product, the quality of the look of the course is equal to the quality of the content, which we've always basically tried to have as high as possible, and want to have the best quality pro-life apologetics content that's out there. So thank you for making all of that possible. It has been a bit of a process getting to this point from, the beginning of the upgrade to where we are now, where we basically have everything set up. But it's really nice to finally be at that point and to be seeing the results. So I hope that you enjoy seeing those results in the time to come. Thanks so much.